That's an area that I've been diving into myself, which is childhood trauma, attachment trauma.
Yeah.
And everyone has it.
Yeah, everybody. Yeah.
Were you able to identify something in that?
Yeah, so in 2016, I remembered being abused as a child. And
how?
I remembered it through a dream first. And then I was like, no, thank you. I'm not going to touch that because it's terrifying.
That was just a bad dream.
But it was a real dream. Like, you know, when I woke up and I was like, that was the most real dream I've ever had. Then I wound up days later, just down the street from here, in my therapist's office, and she said something that triggered me to accept that it was true. And that put me on a really deep journey of big growth and recovery.
So part of my story is because I was so overwhelmed by anxiety and stress that was too much for me as a child, and I didn't have the caregivers in place to help me. So when you have a child, big feelings are happening. So a parent or a caregiver has to help that child understand what's happening and learn to navigate their emotions.
Yeah.
So without that, in absence of that, because I was so overwhelmed, the gift of our mind is that it will never let us be overwhelmed. It will find a way to cope.
But what I realized when it all happened was for about a year or two leading up, there were so many moments where I had actually said to him, you know, I actually don't really want to be in this. And I had this naive idea that he needed me because I was sort of in this caretaker role in our relationship. And I think my ego was just way ahead of itself, thinking like, I'm needed here. And this is a very codependent dynamic. And so at one point I actually wished, I remember he went away and I was laying in bed and I was looking at the ceiling and I was like, oh, I hope he just falls in love with somebody else so that they can take care of him and I won't have to feel bad for breaking up with him. And then he did. Within a month or two of that, he ended up in love with somebody else and he left. And the interesting thing is that this person who I didn't even want to be with, all of a sudden I was just desperate for him.
Oh, why do you think that happens?
Well, the abandonment wound was so alive in that moment. And that's the thing, is the abandonment wound is what keeps us going back to these toxic relationships, or just relationships that don't serve us, or people who really aren't in alignment for us, because that part of us that is so afraid to be abandoned again just gets activated when someone rejects us or leaves, even if they're not right.
Saying how, you're just introverted and shy and uncomfortable in a room. Have you ever figured out where that comes from?
I think everything sort of comes from your childhood. I had from the outside looking in, and if I really think about it, I had a lot of great breaks as a child and a teenager, and had a lot of opportunity. I really did. I'm not going to complain one bit about the position or the situation, but it wasn't always perfect. My parents got divorced in 1978. I lived with my mom, never saw dad. I've got like one or two kind of memories of dad before I was probably 6 or so. I don't really know how much he was around or how often we were sent to be with him. Like if he got visitations, I don't know when he got them or how often he got them or how often he took his opportunity to do that. I don't have a lot of memory of that. And I was living with mom in a real small house in Kannapolis, and woke up one morning and the house was on fire, and big time on fire. And so mom's boyfriend comes into the bedroom and he's like, hey, get your PJs on. We got to get out of here. And I'm like, I'm just kind of waking up, and I'm like, I don't know what's going on, but I get my PJs on and I walk out of my bedroom and I look to the right, and the whole kitchen is just a big wall of fire. Craziest thing I've ever seen in my life. I mean, you never forget some things like that. Well, we walk outside, and the next thing I know, I'm standing, a day or two later, I'm standing in Dad's garage at Lake Norman in Mooresville, and all our stuff's in there. All our stuff's in the garage, and we're going to live with Dad.
My whole childhood was discomfort. My whole childhood was, I guess I shouldn't say whole, because there were beautiful parts of it. I have, like I said, my relationship with my grandparents. I have really beautiful memories of my childhood, but I truly believe that my parents did the best that they could with what they had, but their best was not great.
Yeah.
And I grew up inside of chaos. I grew up inside of fear. I grew up, Daddy had a awful temper, and you never knew, what was going to happen. You never knew, are we going to have a nice family dinner, or is he going to get angry and they're going to get in a fight and he's going to punch a hole in the wall, or rip the TV out and throw it in the back. Like you never knew. And so I've done a lot of therapy to understand sort of the effect that has on a child, and growing up in this anxiety of I never feel safe. So like as a child, I never feel safe because I never know what to expect. And also my role then was to keep the peace, like try and make everybody happy, try and oh no, like let's make it a joke, let's we'll just laugh this off, it's fine, like oh she didn't mean that, like so there's a lot of stuff from the time I was little that I've written a lot about it in my books, and there is a whole bucket of shit that I will never write about because it's too awful.
Oh, I can handle crap. I can handle being treated like shit. I can handle all the whatever emotional abuse or anything that's gone on, is to imagine the way that someone's treating me. Would I ever let them treat my little girl like that?
Yeah.
And I imagine that to be my inner child.
Yes.
And so I somewhat disassociate from it. Even though I know it's me,
yes,
it's easier to access the ability to treat myself properly if I imagine that it's a little girl in me.
And if you dissociate from a trauma, it's on lockdown, but your body still remembers. You get triggered all the time. You can become an addict, you can become a workaholic, you can do all the things to avoid the feelings of those triggers. But when you start to practice something like EMDR therapy, it starts to open up the brain to start to, my therapist said it in this way, where it opens up the resourced part of your brain that can help you almost work out the traumatic experience in that moment.
So at the time, the adaptation that I made was to do what is called dissociating, which is detaching, which is, I call it my spaceship I used to go away in. And it was as if, and on the outside, you would never know. Yeah. I would appear here, I could have a full conversation with you. But in terms of attachment to my body, I wasn't in my body. I wasn't connected. I couldn't tell you how my body even like physiologically felt, let alone the emotions that I was having. But I can navigate the situation. And that was a form of protection. So I was up on my spaceship, hovering safely above the things that were too difficult for me to feel.
You removed every last bit of yourself, other than the one that just was there.
Whatever could power it out. And this is where I got really good. This is where this codependency started, at showing up the way you needed me to.
In a conventional relationship, if you do something to hurt me, my first instinct is to react, to blame you, to demonize you, and to put all of the blame on you, and then to do whatever my coping mechanism is.
Sure.
So that could be trying to convince you to love me deeper because I have this wound in me that needs validation. It could be to ghost you because, once you've hurt me, you're out. Whatever that coping mechanism is, that's where I would deploy it, and I would continue on the pattern. Now, in a conscious relationship, the only thing that makes it really different is that when you hurt me, I'm able to sit with that and share what hurt me and set a boundary if needed, and also look within myself and ask questions like, what does this represent for me right now? What does this feeling remind me of? Is there a time when I was little where I remember feeling this way? And then I can go deeper and like, what is the fear underneath that? And then how can I share my need in a way that you can now meet me? So instead of pushing love away, I'm learning how to work with what's coming up in me as a way to bring me closer to you in relationship. And then also for some of us who like to use spiritual language, closer to God or to source or to higher power, whatever. And that's really it. It's, can we slow down enough to be self-aware in each moment and take some responsibility? That's it.
So do you have to recognize the trauma?
Not even. You don't even have to remember anything. You can just talk about the way it physically feels. Or you could talk about how you yelled at the doorman today, and that experience of yelling at the doorman might have been your trauma response. And so if you just go into the feeling of that trauma response, it can unlock the fight or flight.
We think the thoughts that we rehearse we're so habitual. We're habitual in our behaviors.
Yeah.
We're habitual in our thoughts. If you start to tune in and be conscious and observe your thoughts, most of us will see that they're I call them narratives, because they're repetitive. They're the same story.
Yeah.
Whether it's the story I'm telling me about myself, about my relationships, my place in the world, other people, stories. And we think we're the feelings that we're used to having. But if we look back at the development of all of this, we are that awareness. That's what we will remain. However, over time, right, we've stored all of this other crap. Our habits have been stored, because that's what we were taught. We were taught that's how you take care of your body, or that's what you do in the morning, or that's not what you do in the morning. We have been rehearsing thoughts for so long that now they're beliefs. That's who we think we are. We have a story, essentially, that lives in our mind, that's who we think we are. And I am now a liver of the experience of that's not who we are. We are the awareness. And while those are conditioned, I use the word conditioning a lot, those are conditioned patterns, we can uncondition ourselves, and we can give ourselves freedom to make new choices. So when I started to practice that daily, this is where the family stuff really started to get involved in my healing. As I started to observe myself and watch the thoughts I was having when I'm around my family, thoughts about my family in general, thoughts that were coloring my other relationships that were connected to my family. As I started to observe how I felt around my family and other people that I was relating to. How do you feel when you're going to hang out with this person? How do you feel when you're hanging out with these people? How do you feel when you leave these people?
So mom was broke and had to move back to Norfolk, Virginia to be closer to some family there. That was the decision she made. She couldn't afford, it was just going to be too hard on her to maintain me and Kelly, and she had no job or nothing at that time. And so we went to live with Dad. I didn't know Dad. I didn't know Teresa. She was there and part of Dad's life at that point. And that was a hard thing. Me and Teresa, when I was a kid, man, we butt heads hard. We were sprung into her life. She wasn't, she was with Dad and thinking, man, I've got this vision of this future, and boom, here comes these two kids from his previous marriage that are just now, okay, we're gonna just plop into the household, and she's got to adjust her expectations of her future with Dad. I understand her frustration with that. But me and Kelly, Kelly and me, we just tried, it was weird. There was a lot of good, amazing things that happened because now I'm with Dad. I get to know him, get to go to the races. It was an amazing experience to be going to racetracks and enjoying all those things. But and then when you go to school, so we'd go to school, and you would think that, man, your dad's Dale Earnhardt, and everybody's going to go, wow, that's cool. You're cool because your dad's cool. But it wasn't like that. It just the kids I was going to school with didn't think it was cool, and that didn't create advantages for me like you might think. And I had like 2 or 3 or 4 friends, in school. I knew a lot of people. I mean, just trying to think back on my high school days. I just wasn't outgoing and wasn't one to strike up a conversation. And I was real quiet. And I think it just kind of created this sort of, this sort of sustained personality and approach to life. All through, my teenage years. We went to a lot of different schools. I ended up getting sent to military school for a couple years. I was in a Christian school, got in big trouble there for talking in class and just doing stupid stuff, being a clown. Man, when I went to Christian school, I did kind of come out of my shell for a minute. I was only there for half a year. For whatever reason, the other kids in that school were like me.
The day my brother died is the last day my parents ever parented me. And I was 14. And I mean, legitimately, they checked out. And from 14 until I graduated high school, like nobody one time, did you brush your teeth? Did you do your homework? What are your grades? Never.
How are you?
No. And what I say in the book is I've had more conversations with my 11-year-old about Fortnite than either one of my parents have ever had with me about my brother's death, you know, what I saw that day, what I went through, the trauma of that experience, nothing.
So look at the words you use, like, I can handle the emotional abuse and whatever it is, like, yeah, and people might describe you as like, oh no, she's awesome, she's tough, would probably be a word. And you look at your career and the fact that you're competing against guys and in a sport that is, you know, all of the things, right? Like, that speaks to somebody whose persona has become, you know, very robust, but that doesn't speak to what's beneath it. When you recognize that you have feelings, right? And I'm not talking in a woo-woo kind of kumbaya, but you're a sentient being, you're a woman, you know, and an extraordinary woman and an accomplished woman and a caring woman. And the degree to which all of that gets kind of pushed to one side because you can handle the abuse, as I tell people, just because it's familiar doesn't mean it's healthy.
Right,
And
totally.
So can you just, even if it's a word or two, if you recognize the degree to which you've discarded some of your own, like, care of self, what would that leave you feeling? Like, it's an unconscious process. It's the blue tinted glasses you didn't know. So you don't have to feel shame or guilt. But once you see it and go, wow, I've really disregarded my needs over and over and over. Like, how does that hit you when you really see it?
Like negligent, like abusive in the opposite way that I express it.
Yeah.
Right? It's avoidant.
Yeah.
It's disassociative.
Yeah.
Even though I express more on the side of codependency or the anxious attachment or the wanting or diving in or unpacking, talking. It's actually inside of myself. It feels like it is the opposite side of the spectrum, which is the same whole, as we've kind of been expressing, and it would be like I've disassociated with myself, and so it feels, that's why it's so hurtful, because that's exactly what I do to myself.
There you go. So there's now you've used a word that I want, which is it's hurtful. Because all the words, you're super articulate, but they're a little bit still from here up, right? And I'm just wanting to get a little bit closer to this thing, which you have a huge one of. But really, that's the first glimpse you've given me. It's hurtful. Like, in as much as you can say, I can handle the emotional abuse of whatever boyfriend this or male dad, or it doesn't even have to be male, but you get the point. I'm sure if I were a fly on the wall of your life, I would have witnessed a lot that is hurtful. But you've learned to protect yourself and be okay with it, even though you're not actually okay with it energetically and physiologically. It will manifest in different ways over time. You know, you're still young and healthy. But over time, that's what becomes dis-ease, you know, manifests physiologically because of the absence of ease in our system, because we're actually hurt. And hurt, bedfellow, is also fear, scared.
Yeah.
So that little girl who's protected herself by virtue of becoming tough and resilient is actually hurt and scared.
Yeah.
She's hurt from a past event that was tough, and now she's scared of its repetition. Now that's a different breath, right? So there's something energetically that just got released. So that, I'm guessing, is going to be part of your experience, is that at times that little girl, who I guarantee you is a sweetheart, very shy, very creative, very sensitive, but felt the experience of not being wanted, is my guess.
I mean, just in recent experiences of like things that have gone on, and oh no, I'm gonna cry on you.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
But it was like,
it's okay, this is beautiful.
like I realized that this is the wound.